68, 68, 67, 78, out here, 70 down, 67, take it on. 67 down, 70 down. $1.70 right here, put a peggler on it. Hey, 70 right here, down, 60, take it on.
Each year in midsummer, the tobacco auctioneer's familiar chant makes news in South Carolina. It's sale time in the bright leaf tobacco auction markets throughout the PD region. Another sound, that of cash registers, ringing up almost $200 million in sales annually, reminds us of the importance of this crop to the state's economy. Until recent years, PD farmers grew tobacco on small plots of land as a secondary but important cash crop. Everything had to be done by hand during the wood curing era, a time when someone must stay awake all night tending the fire at the barn in a delicate operation involving both specialized knowledge and seasoned skill. Today, tobacco is raised on large farms by growers skilled in technology and using highly mechanized equipment. One such farm is that of Bruce Marlowe and his brother, David. The Marlowes, like other farmers of the PD, have been growing tobacco for generations. Each year, they produce over 130 acres of bright leaf on their broad and fertile lands in Florence County, the same county which gave birth to the cultivation and marketing of the golden crop in South Carolina over 100 years ago. Listen now while PD residents tell how they raised tobacco during the labor-intensive mule days, as one farmer called this bygone era. Then hear Bruce Marlowe compare those practices with the way he produces tobacco today. We begin with preparation of the seed beds.
Planting the seed bed is very important. That means if you'll have a good crop or a bad crop. Seed bed is one of the most important things to get an early start and have your plants ready for setting. You always have to select a site that the land is real soft and fertile, near woods or where the wind and cold weather won't disturb the plant.
Then we would haul anything available and put on and burn it, and that kill all the weeds or grass or anything whatsoever. You know, if you burn it sufficiently before you plant your tobacco seed, and then you did not have any trouble with grass or weeds in your beds.
Burn it. When they burn it, then they went to plant. They plied it up with a little hole or something like that, a small pile. And you put your seed down, and you walk them in there, just like that, all over the bed. Some people had a barrel to roll them in, but most of them walked them in. And then when you got that through, you put a log around the bunk, around the bed.
We packed them down at that time by stepping on them with our feet. Pack the ground on the seed with our feet.
You got to pack it down in order to, because these little seeds are so fine. If you just happen to spread them across if you just happen to sow them and not stomp them in, they wouldn't germinate, they wouldn't come up. They got to be compressed because they're such tiny seeds, size of a mustard seed.
And we covered the bed with a tobacco canvas, which was a very thin cloth. This cover was kept off the ground about 6 to 8 inches by strips of wire from one side to the other, which was nailed on boards to make a border around the bed.
On warm days, you would roll that cover back and let the sun shine on it, and that would help the plants to grow.
Back in the early 40s, the grass and the weeds were controlled by hand. It took a lot of labor. You had to pull the grass and the weeds from around the small plants. You had to kind of know what you were doing. You had to know what a tobacco plant looked like.
Control of weeds. Dad used to use cotton stalks, and he would stack them so high, maybe a foot high, which really didn't do any good, we didn't think, but that was the American way back then as far as controlling weeds on plant beds. But today, in the modern age, we use a gas. Kills the germination of all used weed seed. Where Daddy used a cheesecloth, we use a plastic over the plant beds. That way, we can seed the beds, we can seed them, and the plastic just has a way of growing them quicker than you cheesecloth. It just carries a higher temperature under your plastic cover, more so than your cheesecloth. Another thing we do, sometimes we will use a type of a barrel, like to roll the seed in the ground to seed them. And then we may, depends on the weather, we may put an inch of water, irrigation water, to really seed them. I like that best. You get better of a germination.
That would be in late March or early April. The plant would be from 6 to 7 inches tall and ready to go to the field.
Each one has to be carefully pulled, one by one, and placed in bundles or placed in bunches and put in these wooden baskets. After we get 8 or 10 baskets pulled during the morning part of the day, before it gets hot, we gather them up and put them under the shade, get them ready to transplant over in the afternoon.
Setting the field was hard work, and usually would take from 6 to 8 people to set the tobacco out. That is when you was hauling water by the wagon, and when you would be digging holes with the hoe, and when you was dropping plants by hand, and when you would set each plant out separate. It would take from 4 to 6 people to set tobacco this way.
Transplanting your seedlings from your plant beds, you have to get a certain amount of labor, and you will pull those plants, the individuals, the ones that are ready. It's like picking a ripe apple or something, you know when it's ready, and you transfer that to your field. And you use a harvester-like transetter. Takes about 6 people, and you will set them 22 inches apart. And it takes, to set an acre of seedling plants, it takes about 7,000 to 8,000 plants.
Back then, we used to work tobacco to death, I reckon. We plowed it every week, whether it needed it or not. We let too much moisture out of the bed if it hadn't rained. We hoed it, chopped it. We probably did more to it than it needed.
Once it gets about knee high, we lay this tobacco by. We take and build up a big bed, throw the dirt up high around the stalk, so that it will hold moisture in the bed. And the bigger the bed, the more moisture that bed would hold.
Topping is the flower. It grows out in, it's the top of the stalk. The stalk shoots straight up and grows leaves out. And when it gets up and you top it once, it only has one top. You break the top out of the stalk.
When you did that, here comes the sucker. And that was almost a never-ending job.
Suckering is it's a bud that'll grow where every leaf comes from the stalk. There'll be a little bud that'll come there. But when you break the top out, the suckers will grow out between every leaf, at the base of every leaf. And you got to break those out. If you let the suckers grow, the leaves won't never get big. And then you would have just little, it wouldn't be good quality tobacco. You just can't let the suckers grow.
We use, I guess you would call herbicide, sucker control. It's what the ingredients is common known is alcohol and soap. And we'll spray that on with a pressure pump spray. We take 4 rows at a time.
The worms come from a tobacco fly. That's a moth type fly that lays these eggs on the leaves. Underside, the eggs are laid on the underside of the leaf and hatch out into a little teeny a worm. And the more he eats of that green leaf, the bigger and larger he gets. All these tobacco worms. They get about 3 inches long, ½ inch in diameter. They really can mess up a field of tobacco in a real hurry if you don't keep them down. All right.
Most farmers use some type of poison to kill insects. Of course, you always miss some. You just about have to pick them off. The unpleasant part about worming the tobacco is most of the time when you tried to put him off the leaf, he would spit the green tobacco juice on you.
We use insecticide. I had the airplane out of Hartsville coming. He sprayed mine. He'd just roll that poison under those leaves and it just killed the worms. I mean, it's unreal.
And then in early July, the plant is beginning to be ready to harvest. You look at the bottom of the plant and the 3 or 4 bottom leaves began to turn yellow. You know it's time to get the old drag out and the mule and start.
That goes on usually for about 2.5 months. That's the busy time, is to harvest. You only harvest mature leaves. It's just like tomato. You can tell when the tomato starts to turn, it's getting ripe. Tobacco starts to turn yellow, it's ripe. It's reached maturity, it's giving up, it's fixing to quit. And you break those leaves off before they, what we call burn up. And that's when you crop it. There's different types of tobacco on the stalk. You start at the bottom of the stalk and you got primings, and then you got lugs, and then you got cutters, and then you got the smoking leaf and the tips. And they want it cropped in those categories. And as you move up the stalk, the grade changes. Of course, the price changes too. Different types have a different price on them. And the upper stalk tobacco usually has your heavy nicotine and your tars in it, which has got more flavor to it. And there's more demand for it. The foreign buyers love it. They don't have that type of tobacco. But the primings and the lugs on the bottom is a cheaper tobacco. It's thin. It doesn't have as much oil in it and the flavor to it. So it sells cheaper.
You babied your tobacco like you would baby a child, just about. You took care of it, you didn't bruise it.
Up to 10 years ago, we did all by hand. We walked and cropped. But now we got those B&O harvesters, which is a little more modern. You ride and you crop and you put it in your belts. And your belts take it over and put it in a tray, and then you have your wreckers. We wreck the tobacco in wrecks. You put it in a tray which holds 14 in no wreck, and then you take it to barn, and put it in the barn. But now, I've just bought a Roanoke tobacco harvester. It's supposed to do it all. It crops it, puts it in your rack, puts it in your trailer, and all you have to do is take it to the barn.
The stringing of the tobacco on the tobacco sticks was usually done at the barn. And this was done by the women folks. You never did see a man stringing the tobacco, because this was unbecoming for a man to string tobacco.
We had one that strung. We had about from 3 to 4 that strung the tobacco. And we had 2 that handed it to the backer, to the stringer from each side. And so it didn't take but 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes to string a stick of tobacco. And we really enjoyed that.
Now, it was an art within itself for a stringer to string tobacco. I can't describe how it's done, because I never did learn how to do it myself, but it was fascinating to watch a stringer string tobacco, put tobacco on a stick.
I thought when I got old enough to string tobacco, I had really accomplished something.
There'd be one or two men there, you know, to take the sticks in the barn and hang them up. It didn't take long to hang it up, but it was a hot job, and it was a real high humid job, and they would come out of the barn wet all over.
Your bulk tobacco barn has replaced stringing. So you put it in a rack, like I say, and you put it in the barn, and so therefore you don't need the string. We have to operate as economical as we can.
In the earlier days, tobacco was cured primarily or entirely with wood. They had what was known as a big old arch that you'd build a fire in. And on the inside of the barn, you'd have large flue-cured pipes that would come out from this arch. And they went around on the bottom, on the ground floor of the tobacco barn, and heat would go through these pipes, and that's where you get the name flue-cured tobacco. And you'd hold a temperature of 95 degrees until the tobacco would turn a yellow gold color. All of the green would fade away. If you get up to around 120 degrees and your tobacco starts wilting, it gets like a limp dish rag, and it starts shrinking up a little bit, and the tips of the leaves will begin to curl up a little bit. You know that you're doing something proper. Mm-hmm. And you keep increasing the temperature maybe 5 degrees every 5 to 6 hours until you get up to 140 degrees. And after you reach 140 degrees, you stay there until your leaf has become completely dry. It becomes so dry that even if you just hit it, it will break into pieces, it will crumble. And then we have the final process of curing, what is known as killing out. Killing out is nothing more than increasing the temperature up to 170 to 180 degrees. And this killing out is nothing more than as you kill the big stem that's in the tobacco leaf. Some of those stems are very large, and it takes a tremendous amount of heat to dry those stems, because if they're not fully dried, when you take the tobacco out the barn, you'll have what is known as a swell stem, and that swell stem will mold real quickly if it's not completely killed, completely dried.
I can remember that they used to cook some mighty good fish stews around the tobacco barns, and when you finished putting in the last time, they would usually have a supper. And played a lot of checkers, particularly on the weekends. They would make checkerboards on the benches that they put the tobacco on, and use bottle caps for checkers.
In the average of 6 to I have cured as much as 10 days. It depends on your tobacco, how ripe it is or how matured it is when you crop it. We use fuel oil. Some use gas in the same barns we have. It's just up to the individual what type of way he wants to cure it, with gas or oil.
Back in those days, the quality of the tobacco was more distinctive than it is now. They had to go for quality. It had more mixed tobacco than they have now. It didn't chew as evenly as it does now. They would have to grade that tobacco to separate some greenish leaves, overripe leaves, from the better quality leaves, and to get your most of your crop.
They would have women and me, and few men did, but mostly women, and bigger girls were graded. And they had a bench to put it on, and they had this bench divided off in sections to put the different grades in. And they make it in about 5 different grades: the first grade, second grade, and the third, and then the good trash they call it, and the sorry trash.
After you took it off the stick, they had once you take it off the stick and grade it out, you had to tie it up. That's a slow process, real slow. So it's real.